Hi, my name is Robbin Miller. I am the host of Miller Chat. Today I'm going to do episode 2 of Sociology and Now. Episode 2 today is on affirmative action and Disability Pride Month. I just want to remind you that Sociology Now is about how external forces in our environment, our community, affect us. And this is a new series because I teach sociology for undergraduates and I enjoy teaching it, and I like the topics that come across. So, to move on, first topic I'm going to talk about is what happened with affirmative action last month in the Supreme Court. As we all know, the Supreme Court voted 6-3 by conservatives, liberals 3, conservatives 6, to end affirmative action as we know it. Colleges can no longer use race, and admitting students for selective colleges like the Ivy Leagues, for example. The suit was brought by Asian American students who felt that race-conscious admission was unconstitutional. Well, the court thought otherwise. And even though they can't have race anymore in the application process, students can write about, if they want to, how being a certain race has affected them through their lives to where they are now in their college essays, but the colleges cannot consider race at all. The only exception are the military academies. Like West Point, they're exempted from this ruling where they can use race. Why them and not that? I don't know, but it is what it is on that part. Just give me a second to explain the brief history of affirmative action. I mean, why do we have it? Why was it implemented in the 1960s? It was to remedy the wrongs over the last 150 years toward people of color who were underrepresented in employment and being accepted to selective colleges, to colleges and universities across the country. In the past, sociologists would have looked how affirmative action promoted inclusion, diversity, and equity in the workplace and in schools, and asked the question, having affirmative action, does it help underrepresented groups achieve the American dream for being successful and happiness in life? So that's how they would look at it without judgment. On the other hand, one would argue that reverse racism has become an issue with affirmative action programs that came into being. One sociologist, Robbin Miller, who's the author of White Fragility, states that requires the ongoing use of institutional power and authority to spread prejudice and discriminatory actions in systematic ways with far-reaching effects. Whites have the power and position to influence laws, and again I'm quoting her, in practices that define American society in ways not widely available to persons of color. Page 221 in the Real World Textbook, 8th edition by Kerry Ferris and Jill Stein. So while people may talk about reverse racism, according to this sociologist, Robbin Miller, she feels that whites have the advantage much more than people of color and underrepresented groups to influence policy and programs and services. Now, moving forward, how a sociologist going to view now that affirmative action can't be used in selecting students of underrepresented groups for colleges. They would study how the impact of ending it will affect them, number one, BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous populations of color, from attending these competitive colleges. Are there going to be less? Are they going to be the same? I guarantee probably not more. And what's happening on the college campuses? What would be the implications for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion on these college campuses, especially the Ivy League that promote empowerment, leadership, and diversity, and how they advertise themselves? Well, that is yet to be seen. However, right now there is a lawsuit against one Ivy League in particular for admitting white students due to wealthy donors who may be alumni. I gather moving forward, now that affirmative action has ended for selective colleges, that future lawsuits will probably be forthcoming as well in discrimination and admission practices at these elite colleges. So it remains unseen and how it's going to affect the diversity goals for these selective colleges as well. I'm aware in the South, some of them, those colleges by their governors have eliminated that or tried to. So again, we'll have to see what happens with that as well. It's interesting when I've asked students sociology, have they heard of affirmative action? They all shake their head. I'm like, what is that? And when I tell them it's about a legal remedy for underrepresented populations to attend selective colleges or jobs because of past discrimination practices over the last 150 years. Some of them have actually said, and this is people across demographics, well, why can't they just take them as they are? So after I educate them about it, they do say, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So I guess in high school, K through 12, especially high school, they're probably not even learning about affirmative action practices, which they should as part of their history, but I guess they're not. So education is also going to be quiet now on the high school level as well about affirmative action, what it was and what it is no more, to educate students about that. Now let's move on. Let's talk about how, regardless of how affirmative action turns out, we're still going to have the structure and politicalism that are still among us. In the 1980s, you know, my generation, they started these multicultural sensitivity programs because when affirmative action policies went in place in workplace and colleges, there was a lot of issues, a lot of interaction problems between students, staff, faculty. And again, sociologists would look at the impact of affirmative action practices in that setting about how people are getting along, how people are working together, what are the problems, what are they stemming from, like structural racism as an example, discrimination, prejudice. So they would look at all those factors. So then you have multicultural programs that came into being. And according to what I read in the sociology textbook, it's basically, it hasn't really worked, to be honest with you, over the years. It's been over 40 years since they've been implemented. Because, first of all, some white folks get resentful. Another thing, it's only a one-time deal. You know, everybody's here, and then boom, it's done. And then you have those rippling effects, those subconscious thoughts that we still have come out in our microaggressions toward people of color. So those are still issues. The bottom line is that it's up to management, the top dog, so to speak, the powers to be, to make it ongoing about multicultural education, enforcing policies that discriminate, that treat people unfair, that don't promote equity, diversity, inclusion, creating safe spaces so people can have these discussions. Because when you mention race in the workplace, let's talk about race, everybody shuts up. People are uncomfortable. In my class, so we do talk about it because it's a safe space for them. For those that would like to participate, nobody's ever forced to participate. So it really, when it comes to multicultural program, it is really up to management to make sure it's ongoing. One-time deals, no. You got to have continual dialogue with multicultural practices because people still have subconscious behaviors in their mind. It takes a long time to tease out and to look at how it's affecting students, for example, people you work with, to learn how to be more aware of what you do and change your belief system. So shifting gears, let's talk about the second topic. We're going to talk about Disability Pride Month. Now, what is that? That started a few years ago. And I also wanted to state that sociologists would look at the impact of Disability Pride Month, the meaning, the purpose, moving forward, what has been accomplished, looking at pride, belongingness, connection, as well as the 23rd celebration of the American Disabilities Act being passed on July 26th. So it was passed in 1990 by President Bush I. There was an amendment to upgrade the ADA because when they had the Americans with Disabilities Act, people weren't getting those accommodations. There was a lot of misunderstanding and communication, so they had an update or an amendment to it, which is now in effect. So sociologists will also be looking at that. So what is Disability Pride Month? I have a short video that's going to be shown It's a couple of minutes about the month, Disability Pride Month, and the title is Disability Pride Month Inspires Self-Love, a YouTube video that we're going to show right now. So enjoy.
Taking pride in my personal disability is very much about like radically loving myself in a world that wants me to not love myself.
Whether it's physical disabilities, mental disabilities, neurodiversity, they're taking pride in who they are and finding people who say that what you need and who you are is not too much. Your disability isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It's a new way of seeing, and it's something that's worth being celebrated, and there are people who will celebrate that with you. I first learned about Disability Pride Month in a class that I took on disability studies. It was an attempt for me to connect with other disabled students and the disabled community in a way that I hadn't been able to before in college. There is a whole beautiful history of disabled folks, of disabled advocates fighting for our rights that we get to be a part of. There is an incredible disability culture of innovation and creativity and care and mutual aid that we get to learn from and live in.
Disability Pride Month is how I really started connecting with other disabled people and was like, oh my God, other people are feeling these feelings that I'm feeling and feeling the shame that I'm feeling. And then they're able to take that and turn it into pride rather than feeling like we have to shrink ourselves to fit into a non-disabled world.
I think we kind of give each other the courage to celebrate and to take pride when folks see other disabled people talking about their disabilities, talking about disability pride, and thinking, hey, if that person can be open and vulnerable about that, maybe I can do the same.
The world has, for so long, taught us that we should be ashamed of being disabled. The thing that really, really helped me be comfortable using mobility aids when I really needed them, but didn't know if I wanted to go out in public and use them, was seeing other disabled people being proud of using their mobility aids in public, being proud of being visibly disabled and owning it and being like, what other people think of me is not my problem. It's not my business what they think about me. I am doing what is best for me and my body. And if other people want to judge me or shame me for that, that's a them problem, not a me problem.
I think awareness is kind of the start, but disability pride takes it a step further and says that, it's more than just saying we are here. It's saying we are here and we belong. Conversations around awareness often kind of have a lean of cure to them, of, let's be aware of this so that we can cure it, fix it. And with disability pride, we are acknowledging that we don't need to be cured. We don't need to be fixed. We are not what needs to be fixed. It's this inaccessible world that needs to be fixed. Focus on fixing these systems that keep us out of public life, that keep us out of school, that make it harder for us to work, that keep us from getting married without losing our benefits in healthcare. Those are the things that need to be fixed, not our bodies.
I am so in awe of and indebted to the disabled community that came before me.
I'm proud to be part of a community that is so just full of life and just passion for wanting to create change and wanting to create acceptance rather than just awareness.
Disability is a whole spectrum, and it's so diverse. And it's not a word to be ashamed of. It's not a dirty word. It is an accurate descriptor to anyone out there who is looking for a disabled community, who feels that they don't have that space yet and is struggling to come to terms with their own identity. There's nothing wrong with you, and there is nothing wrong with the word disabled, and you are part of an incredible tradition and culture of disabled people.
I do love myself. My body can be a little hard to live with some days, but in spite of that, and in spite of all of the people and messaging of the world that has told me to not love myself, I'm going to do it anyway.
Well, welcome back. I hope that you learned a few key points from it, such as people with disabilities want to belong. They don't want to be pitied or viewed as stories of inspiration. They want to focus on their strengths and not weakness having a disability. They want to have pride as a milestone and not be shamed and hushed. Using the social model, because there's three models. There's a medical model where as they use in the medical system, if you have an illness or a condition, you're sick, you're shunned upon, and you have no say. The moral model is if something happens to you, if you're born a certain way, people feel it's some religion, spiritual beliefs. And then you have the social model, which is the environmental barriers that are created, the structural inequity, structural discrimination, practices, policies that prevent people with disabilities from having independent living, having a quality of life, achieving the American dream, for living like anyone else, able-bodied people in the community. So people with disabilities go by the social model. It's the environmental barriers, stairs to a place, or not handicapped parking as an example. Going to a doctor's office and not having a table high enough, or not even able to take a mammogram. So, healthcare issues, can't afford medications. So those are complicated issues. Housing, not many accessible housing, or affordable for that matter. So that's what was the key point of the video. I hope that you enjoyed. Now let's talk a little bit about the flag. Where did it come from? Why did it start? Well, the founder, McGill, that was her last name, started the flag because when they were celebrating the Disability Pride Month a couple of years ago, it was only in independent living centers. And it wasn't widely known or widely celebrated like other months, like Pride Month for LGBTQI or Black History Month or Women's History Month. So this individual wanted to create a flag. Anne McGill, that's her name. She was a writer with cerebral palsy who designed the flag to make it celebratory for all people to come and attend, not just people with disabilities. So that's what they're doing this month, making it open to everybody to enjoy, public awareness. When it was first made, it was made with a zigzag figure. But that was changed because it was causing seizures when people viewed it on a mobile device. So she put out a call to the disability community to redesign it. So in 2021, they recreated the flag with an accessible design, as you see here, and I'll explain what it is. The green stands for sensory disabilities, blindness, deafness, lack of smell, taste, and auto processing disorder. The blue represents emotional and psychiatric disabilities. The white stands for non-visible and undiagnosed disabilities. Yellow gold for neural diversity such as cognitive and intellectual. And the red represents physical disabilities. The parallel stripes that you see are developed diagonally across to symbolize the barriers that people with disabilities face on the faded charcoal background, and also to invoke the light to help cut through this darkness for equality. The dark background as well of the vertical and horizontal backgrounds also represent rage and protest against the mistreatment of people with disabilities due to violence, ableism, negligence, suicide, and eugenics. According to the creator statement, black is also a connection to the pirate's Jolly Roger flag, a general symbol of rebellion. So that's the flag, and I'm glad that they have that flag. No more the zigzag. It's more of the parallel stripes. So the question is, where do all these inequities come from in discrimination? Why do we still have it? Why we always had it? So I want to talk about its fears that people feel. Holland Hahn, a social justice advocate who recently passed away, he talked about his two theories of people having anxiety about why they're uncomfortable, in this case, people with disabilities. And it's two types of anxiety. There's the existential anxiety that comes to a perceived threat due to the individual's functional limitation that an able-bodied person becomes identified with. In other words, the able body internalizes the threat of the person with a disability and chooses to project their fears onto themselves. For example, when people see people in a wheelchair, all of a sudden they, inside, they're like, oh my God, how would I deal with that? Oh my God, how did that happen? I hope it doesn't happen to me. It creates an uneasiness, a discomfort. It also causes people to say stupid things. For example, a colleague of mine in a wheelchair went to the Department of Motor Vehicle, DMV, a long time ago in Worcester, and there was a woman with a Bible who wanted to pray for him while he was waiting on line to get his license. And he said, ma'am, you could pray for everyone else. Another colleague of mine in a wheelchair was getting out of his parking space, and a handicapped parking space, and when a woman comes up to him and says, I don't know how you live your life every day. When I tell these stories to people, they look at me like I have two heads on my shoulder. I'm like, they are true. Why is it acceptable to talk to people like that in the 21st century? Why is that still acceptable? So that's an example of existential anxiety. Something inside makes us just really weird and uncomfortable about saying, oh my God, it could happen to me. Then you have the aesthetic anxiety, which is what the person looks like. People, if somebody is spitting and drooling, people are like, oh, that's totally disgusting. Or if they have a facial disfiguration, they're like, oh, I just can't look. So there's two threats: anxiety that happens internally, existential, and then externally, aesthetic, what a person looks like. So, physical appearance by your clothing, your jewelry, and so on. But broadening this out and generalizing, these two types of anxiety can also affect how people view people of color. Let's take the example of the LGBTQI. What's happening in the South and Midwest about teenagers can't have affirming care because they feel they're protecting them. What are they protecting them from? Why is somebody gender your business? They have parents. And I think it has to do with the anxiety. I think it's just the existential anxiety that these politicians feel like, oh, if it was me, how would anybody ever want to do that to themselves? Or how they appear, how people who are transgender may appear. I'm not saying they appear any different, but some may do, and like everybody, may appear differently too. But looking at it, if they see people, their style is different from what they're used to physically, they will feel uncomfortable as well. And then they want to create these cockamamie policies and programs to prevent LGBTQI people from living an independent life. So the anxiety model that I'm talking about affects not only people with disabilities, but if you broaden it now, it faces sexuality, it faces race. In 70s and 80s, when we had segregated neighborhoods, if a person of color went into a white neighborhood, everybody got nervous. They got like, oh, why are they here? So again, it's part of those anxieties that people are feeling. Now, we're in the 21st century. So are those anxieties still existent? Absolutely. Are they going away soon? No, they're not. I mean, besides the anxiety, is also, where does that all come from? And that comes from how people are raised in their home. How are they raised? What is their religious beliefs? What is their culture? What is their peer group? So all of that anxiety comes subconsciously in the mind, where people were raised a certain way or read something or a group dynamic or culture or who knows what. Those created those fixed belief systems subconsciously in their mind. So when they see something that they're not used to or they're uncomfortable, the anxiety comes up. Oh my God, I can't be that way. How can somebody live like that? Or I don't like the way the person looks like. It makes me uncomfortable. Or if two people are kissing, if two people of the same sex are kissing, all of a sudden the politicians want to ban people doing that. Or if teenagers want to be transgender, all of a sudden a politician wants to save them. Save them from what? It's their bodies, not them. From, appearing, I guess, if you look at physical appearance, saying, oh, that's not cool, or existential, oh, I wouldn't do that to my body. Why would you want it to your body? So we have some serious issues going on. We're going backwards. We're not going forward. And thank God we have a progressive president that's trying to change the way things are. by directing his administration of what he can do to say, this is discrimination, this has to stop. And again, it all deals with the anxieties, with the backdrop being how people were socialized at home. So when we talk about, again, multicultural, or as we bring this together, you have multicultural programs for race, gender, religion. It has to be ongoing. The dialogue has to keep on going. And we still have subtleties. For example, we had it where a kid's wearing dreadlocks and they had him cut his dreadlocks to play a basketball game. Or more recently, at a graduation for 8th grade, a kid wearing dreadlocks wore a sweatshirt, black sweatshirt. And the white teachers felt uncomfortable with that because subconsciously they had that aesthetic anxiety saying, oh, this doesn't look right. You know, everybody else is dressed up and this individual with dreadlocks, person of color, is wearing a black sweatshirt. Oh, we don't want that. That's not cool. We would never do that. Existential anxiety. And then they forced that student to wear a white shirt. So go figure that. So in conclusion, sociologists would look at these external forces. They would look at the isms, racism, genderism, ethnicism, ethnic group, sex. So they look at a broad base about how these factors impact individuals in our society. How do people interact with each other? To close up, sociology looks at 3 paradigms. You have the structural paradigm, which are the rules and policies, where usually are the people in power, like I mentioned. No more affirmative care for people who want to be transgender. 2, you have the conflict model, which is Marxism, about the haves and the have-not. And then the last one is the interactional model, which is about how people communicate with each other one-on-one. So there's 3 paradigms. Then we have the new one, which is the feminist model, about women, gender. And of course, as we talk and more research, we'll probably have more paradigms of thinking. So again, these are paradigms of thinking. So to wrap up, it's nice to have these Pride Months. It's nice to honor, and I'm glad in the 21st century, it's finally happening. In my generation, it was more like, oh, don't talk about that. Don't go there. Where are the people? Why is only this group? It was a starting point in the 80s, and I'm glad in the 21st century it's better and it's more open, where everybody else could be aware. And of course, anytime you have more openness and acceptance, is always going to be those group of people who feel threatened. And again, due to those anxiety and their educational training or socialization that makes them just uncomfortable. That will never change. But having dialogue, education, changing policy, empowering people to be leaders. So this has been another episode of Miller Chat. Good night.